These days, knowing that most of our food supply travels more than 1,500 miles before it ever gets to the grocery store, more people are trying to eat closer to home. That means some people are starting new vegetable and fruit gardens, but not everybody has the space or maybe wants to start a new garden area. Some people are looking for ways to incorporate some edible plantings into a landscape type situation. Today we want to look at some ideas for doing that. We can start, for example, right here at the entry to this garden area where we have an interesting border that's been created with carrot plants and garlic. You can probably think of other plants that could be used as border plants. Swiss chard is a great one for that. Also, any of our parsley plants or many of our other herbs. If we continue on up the driveway toward the house here, we have a hazelnut tree, which is just getting big enough to come into production. There's also some young blueberry plants, which will soon grow into a nice hedge, providing some lovely flowers in the spring, of course the wonderful fruit, and nice fall color. Right behind the blueberry hedge, these small trees are growing into cherry trees. These are Nanking cherries, again already starting to produce a nice crop that will become a nice ornamental tree. Follow me on over to the other side of the landscape and we'll see some more ideas over here. We find another bush that looks like it's loaded with berries. This is actually a bush type cherry, and these will ripen into a nice tart cherry on about a 4-foot bush. This also can make a nice hedge as we have down the side of the driveway, but behind that hedge we have apple trees. Included in with the regular apple trees there are a couple of crab apples, which can be quite useful in the edible landscape, not only for the crab apples to make jelly, but the crab apples are a smaller growing tree which can provide you a good pollinator if you don't have room for additional apple trees. As we start down the path here, we see where the strawberries have been used for a nice evergreen ground cover and obviously are being very productive this year. Herbs, of course, are a great plant for the edible landscape and can be used in many types of situations, such as this thyme that's been used here between the stepping stones. As we approach the house, we find one of several arbors around the landscape that are supporting different types of grapevines. This grapevine will have plenty of grapes on it this year, and this one's kind of interesting in that the grapevine is sharing its support with one of the native wisteria vines. In the next bed, this interesting plant is actually artichoke. Now this is not a plant that everyone is going to try to grow because it's a bit challenging. You about need to have a greenhouse to overwinter it to get a long enough growing season. Up on the side of the house we find a couple of vines. You may not recognize this kiwi vine. This is actually not the kiwi that produces the big fuzzy fruit that we find in the grocery store, but rather a much smaller, sort of a grape-sized, shiny little fruit that, again, we call the hardy kiwi. You might not recognize either this pink flower. This is actually not a vine, it's more of a shrub, but it's being trained and used kind of as a vine. This is actually an elderberry. The berries off of this native elderberry plant will be used to make some very nice jellies and syrups. Then we have our latest addition to this landscape is this herb bed incorporated into this nice sunny spot. Now I could see this also being a place where a person might tuck in a few vegetable plants, perhaps a cherry tomato plant on a trellis up against a wall. It's also a good place to plant something like the mint over here because planting it in a restrained area like this will keep it from escaping into the rest of the landscape. I think this is a great kind of place to have an herb bed because it's right by the path where you walk by it, you brush by the leaves and can smell the foliage of your herbs. It's also, more importantly, very convenient right outside of the door so that when you're in the kitchen and discover you need a snip of herbs, you can run right out and get it. Well, starting an edible landscape isn't something you have to do all at once, but if you've gotten some ideas of some plants you might be able to use into your landscape, you can start kind of one at a time. Whenever you need a new plant, try to think of something that would also provide you an edible crop.